12 men in an open boat, the Sea of Galilee, at night. The wind comes without warning, the way it always does on that lake, funneled down through the hills from the north, hitting the water like a hammer. The waves are not gentle. They are not the kind of waves you watch from a beach with a cup of tea. They are the kind that get inside the boat, the kind that have names in the fisherman's language, the kind that end careers and end lives. And in the stern of that boat, on a cushion, a man is asleep. You have probably heard this story, but stay with me, because what happens next is not just a miracle, it is a declaration. And to understand what is being declared, you have to go back, way back, to another body of water in another era, where another man stood at the edge of the impossible with an army behind him and a sea in front of him, and nothing between him and death. This is the story of every time God touched the sea, from the Red Sea to the shores of Galilee, from Moses holding a staff over dark water to a fisherman named Peter, sinking in the middle of the night, reaching for a hand he could barely see. Every one of these moments is connected. Every one of them is saying the same thing. And one of them, one of these miracles, asked a question that the men who witnessed it could not answer. Not that night, not for a long time after. We will get to that question, but not yet. First, you need to stand where Moses stood. You need to feel what he felt. The ground at his feet, the sound of 600 chariots behind him, the smell of salt and fear. You need to understand that the miracle did not happen because Moses was calm. It did not happen because the Israelites had faith. It happened because of who was standing with them at the water's edge. And that changes everything. The Hebrew name for the body of water Moses crossed is Yam Suf. It does not mean Red Sea. It means Sea of Reeds, a marshy, shifting, treacherous stretch of water at the edge of Egypt. The name matters because a sea of reeds is not the kind of water you look at and think, we can cross this. It is the kind of water that swallows things, carts, animals, people. And on the night God split it open, there were perhaps 2 million people standing on its western bank. You have seen the paintings. You have probably seen the film. But strip away the spectacle for a moment and sit with the human reality of what Exodus 14 describes. These are not soldiers. They are former slaves. People who have never made a decision larger than which brick to set down next. They have been walking for days. Their children are crying. And when they turn around, they can see the dust rising from Pharaoh's chariots on the horizon. 600 of them, the best Egypt had. Moses lifts his staff, and then the text says something that most readers skip over. Exodus 14:21. The Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all that night. All that night. This was not a snap of the fingers. This was a long, slow, grinding miracle. The east wind, in Hebrew, ruach, which also means breath, also means spirit. The same word used in Genesis 1 when the Spirit of God hovered over the dark water at the very beginning of everything. God was not just parting a sea. He was doing what he had done at creation, bringing order out of chaos, life out of the void, a path where there was no path. Josephus, the first century Jewish historian, writes in his Antiquities of the Jews that this event was remembered in Israel not just as a miracle of escape, but as a moment of recreation, as if the world had been made new. He preserves the tradition that the Israelites sang on the other side, and they did. Exodus 15 records it. one of the oldest songs in the Hebrew Bible. Miriam takes a tambourine. The women dance. They have just walked through the bottom of the sea on dry ground. Here's what most people miss: the morning after the crossing. The Israelites arrive at a place called Marah. The name means bitter, and the water there is exactly that: undrinkable, poisonous. The people who just watched the sea split open are now complaining that they have nothing to drink. And God does not scold them. He shows Moses a piece of wood. Moses throws it into the bitter water, and the water becomes sweet. This is a small miracle by Red Sea standards. Nobody makes a film about Marah, but you should not miss it because it is God saying something specific. I do not just part the impossible for you. I purify what is already there. I make the bitter thing sweet. I heal the thing you already have to drink. That pattern, provision inside the ordinary, not just the spectacular, will matter later. Now, move forward 40 years. Joshua stands at the Jordan River. Moses is dead. The promised land is on the other side of the water. And the Jordan, at flood stage, is not a river you wade across. It is wide. It is fast. It is cold. God tells Joshua, send the priests first. Put the Ark of the Covenant on their shoulders and tell them to walk into the water, not to the water's edge, into the water. They have to step in before it parts. Joshua 3:15-16 records what happens the moment the priest's feet touch the Jordan. The water stops, piles up, stands in a heap upstream, and the people cross on dry ground. Again, 40 years later, different leader, same God. Pay attention to this, because what God is doing is not just solving a logistical problem. He is making a theological statement to a generation that did not see the Red Sea. He is saying, you heard the stories. You know what I did for your parents. Here, watch. I will do it again for you. Every generation gets their own crossing. 500 years pass. The promised land has been settled, divided, fought over, and half lost. The northern kingdom of Israel is in spiritual freefall. A king named Ahab, a queen named Jezebel, altars to Baal on every high hill, and God raises up a prophet named Elijah to stand in the fire of that moment. You know Elijah's story, the showdown on Mount Carmel, the fire from heaven, the drought he called with the word. But the moment we are here for comes near the end of his life. On the banks of the same Jordan that Joshua crossed, Elijah is an old man now. He knows what is coming. He walks to the Jordan with his apprentice, a younger man named Elisha, at his side. When they reach the bank, Elijah does something you would not expect. He takes off his cloak, his mantle, the outer garment that marks him as a prophet, rolls it up, and strikes the water. The Jordan parts. No staff, no ark, no priest, just an old man's coat and the God who honors his own pattern. They cross on dry ground, Elijah and Elisha, alone and on the other side. Elijah is taken up into heaven in a whirlwind. The cloak falls. Elisha picks it up. And here's where it gets remarkable. Elisha walks back to the Jordan alone. He holds up the cloak of his dead teacher, and he says out loud to a river, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" He strikes the water. The Jordan parts again. Same cloak, different man, same miracle. Because the miracle was never about Elijah. The miracle was never about the cloak. The men watching from the other bank, the company of prophets from Jericho, see it happen, and they know exactly what it means. They bow to the ground. The God of Elijah is the God of Elisha. He does not retire. He does not change shifts. He does not belong to a generation or a prophet or a method. He belongs to no one, and he is faithful to everyone. Hold that thought. Because now we need to leave Israel entirely. We need to board a ship at the port of Joppa, heading west toward Tarshish, in the opposite direction from where God told the prophet to go. Jonah's story is usually told as a children's story. The big fish, the 3 days, the happy ending. But read it again as an adult, and what you find is one of the most psychologically honest portraits of a man running from God in the entire Bible. God tells Jonah to go to Nineveh, the capital of Assyria, Israel's most feared enemy, a city of perhaps 500,000 people, a city known for impaling its prisoners on stakes along the road as a warning to others. God says, go there, preach, give them a chance. Jonah runs. He boards the first ship he can find going the other direction, goes below deck, and falls asleep. And then the Lord hurls a great wind onto the sea. Not permits, not allows, hurls. God throws the storm with the same intent as a soldier throwing a spear. The sailors are terrified. These are experienced men. They have sailed storms before, but this one is different. They cast lots to find out who has brought this catastrophe upon them, and the lot falls on Jonah. He tells them who he is and what he has done. He tells them to throw him overboard. The sea will calm. And they do not want to. That is the detail that gets buried in the familiar version. These pagan sailors, men who have never heard of the God of Israel, argue with Jonah. They row harder. They try to bring the ship to shore. They do not want to throw a man into the sea. But the storm grows worse. Finally, they pick Jonah up and throw him in. The sea stops its raging immediately. And these sailors, terrified, offer sacrifices to the Lord and make vows. They have just met the God of Israel, not through a sermon, not through the temple, not through a prophet standing at a podium, through a storm he threw. A great fish swallows Jonah. He is inside it for 3 days and 3 nights, and in the dark, in the deep, with seaweed wrapped around his head. Jonah prays, and the fish deposits him on dry land. Here's the part nobody tells you. The miracle in the book of Jonah is not primarily the fish. The fish is the vehicle. The miracle is that God went after a man who was running from him, and he used the sea to do it. The same sea that drowned Pharaoh's army, the same waters that stood in a heap for Joshua. God turned that sea into a pursuit, into a rescue. He will do that again. Jesus knew the story of Jonah. He quoted it when the Pharisees demanded a sign, some spectacular proof of who he was. He gave them one reference point, Matthew 12:40. For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The sign of Jonah, not the fish, the 3 days. Which means that before you ever reach the Sea of Galilee, Jesus has already told you how to read what happens there. Every sea miracle is a shadow, and he is the substance. Now, back to that boat. The disciples have been following Jesus all day across the northern shore of Galilee, through crowds, through heat, through hours of teaching. It is evening. Jesus says, "Let us cross to the other side." They get in the boat. He goes to the stern and falls asleep on the cushion, and the storm comes. The Greek word Mark uses is leilaps, not the ordinary word for wind, not even the word for a bad storm. Leilaps is a whirlwind squall, a sudden, violent, spinning column of air. The same word appears in the Greek translation of Job, when God speaks to Job out of the whirlwind. Mark is not describing bad weather. He is describing the kind of force that makes experienced fishermen, men who grew up on this lake, certain they are about to die. And they are certain, that is what the text says, not anxious, not worried. The disciples wake Jesus and say, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Jesus stands up. He rebukes the wind. The word is epitimeo. It is the exact same word used throughout the Gospels when Jesus cast out a demon. He does not pray for the storm to calm. He does not petition the Father. He rebukes the storm, addresses it directly, with authority, as if it is a hostile force that has overstepped its bounds. And there is a great calm. Then he turns to his disciples and asks two questions. Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith? No one answers. The text says they were filled with great fear. A different fear now. Not the fear of drowning, but the fear of standing in the presence of something that should not exist in the world of ordinary men. And they asked each other, quietly, in a boat that was no longer moving, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" That is the question. That is the one planted at the opening of this video. The question the disciples could not answer. Not that night, not for a long time after. Because the correct answer is the answer that reframes every sea miracle in this video. Who is this? He is the one who breathed the Ruach over the water in Genesis 1. He is the one who aimed the storm at Jonah. He is the one who told Moses to hold out his staff. He is the one whose invisible hand held the Jordan in a heap while Joshua's people walked across on dry ground. He is the Lord of every water, and he was asleep on a cushion in the stern of the boat. If you have found this worth your time, a subscription costs you nothing and helps this channel reach people who need to hear these stories. But stay, because what happens next on this lake is the strangest and most personal thing in any of the Gospels. It is the fourth watch of the night, 3 a.m. The disciples are in the boat again, this time without Jesus, who has stayed behind to pray alone on the mountain. The wind is against them. They have been rowing for hours and they are going nowhere. And then, in the darkness, they see something moving across the surface of the water toward them. They think it is a ghost. They cry out in fear, and then the voice comes. Across the wind, across the waves, and it says, "Take heart, I am." The Greek is ego eimi, I am. The same two words God spoke from the burning bush when Moses asked for his name. The same construction Jesus will use again and again in the Gospel of John. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the resurrection. But here, on the water, in the dark, at 3 a.m, he says it without any predicate, just I am. Peter. And this is so deeply, painfully, beautifully Peter. Says, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." If it is you, not when, if. He is not certain, but he asks anyway. He asks to do the impossible based on a voice he can barely hear, on a windswept lake, in the dark. When the sensible thing, the safe thing, the obvious thing is to stay in the boat. Jesus says one word, "Come." Peter gets out of the boat. He walks on the water. The text says he walked, past tense, completed action. He actually did it for a moment. A fisherman from Galilee stood on the surface of the sea in the dark, and it held him. And then he noticed the wind, and he was afraid, and he began to sink. "Lord, save me." 3 words, the shortest prayer in the Bible. And immediately, that word, immediately, Jesus reaches out his hand and catches him. Not after a moment, not after Peter had learned his lesson sufficiently, not after the fear had run its course. Immediately, the hand that formed a sea reached out at the first sound of that man's voice sinking in it. That is the character of this God. That is what every crossing, every parting, every storm has been building toward. Not a display of power, but a revelation of nature. He catches, he pursues, he reaches. Now, the last scene, and it is the one that will stay with you longest. It is after the resurrection. After all of it, the cross, the tomb, the Sunday morning, the locked rooms, the appearances in Jerusalem. The disciples have gone back to Galilee, back to the lake, back to the only life they still know how to live. Peter says, I am going fishing. 6 others go with him. They fish all night. They catch nothing. At dawn, a man stands on the shore. He calls out to them, Children, do you have any fish? They do not recognize him. He tells them to cast the net on the right side of the boat. They do, and the net fills 153 fish. The text says exactly, with the specificity of someone who counted every one, and the net does not break. John recognizes him first. He turns to Peter and says 3 words, It is the Lord. And Peter, the man who sank, the man who denied Jesus 3 times beside a charcoal fire while the soldiers watched, tucks in his outer garment and jumps into the sea. He does not wait for the boat. He does not compose himself. He jumps. He swims to shore. And when he gets there, dripping and breathless, he finds a charcoal fire already burning, fish already cooking, bread. Jesus had made breakfast before they arrived, before they caught their fish, before Peter swam to shore. The fire was already lit. The food was already there. Jesus had already prepared before anyone had asked. He says to them simply, without ceremony, without drama, come and have breakfast. No one dared ask him who he was. They all knew. If this video is reaching someone in your life who is at the edge of impossible water right now, share it with them. And subscribe if these stories have been worth your time. We will see you at the next one. Every miracle at the sea is the same miracle. Not because the water is the same, but because the God standing at its edge never changes. So here are the 3 things to carry from every sea in this story. The first, God commands what terrifies you. Whatever you're standing in front of right now, the diagnosis, the debt, the door that closed, is not larger than what Moses faced at the Yam Suf. God did not ask Moses to be unafraid before he moved. He moved first. He speaks to the thing that has you paralyzed, and it listens. The second, he meets you at the edge, not after you cross, not when your faith is strong enough, not when you stop sinking. Peter was mid-sink when the hand arrived. The priests were mid-step in the Jordan when the water parted, not on the bank, not on the other side, but in the moment their feet touched water that had not yet moved. If you are waiting to feel ready before you step, you have misread every crossing in this video. And the third, the one that stays, he already made breakfast. Before you got there, before you caught the fish, before you swam to shore, before you worked out what you were going to say, the fire was already lit. The food was already on it. And he was already at the water's edge, waiting. That is who he is. That is what every sea has been saying. From the moment the Ruach moved over the dark water at the beginning of everything, To the morning, a group of tired, confused, grieving fishermen smelled smoke and bread on the shore of Galilee. He was always already there. We will see you at the next sea.